So good afternoon. I think it looks like a heavy lunch. Once again, extremely thankful for our panelists for coming over, and they have a great experience to share. Now we are getting into the most thought about subject, right? So we have, if I ask this audience about how many of you went into the AI pilots, pretty much everybody would raise their hands. But now, once you ask the question, how many are really making it impactful in production, the number of hands will start coming down significantly, right? So that is a big subject nowadays in terms of how do we take it to production in a sustainable way. So that's the topic today. So without further ado, I will go to Lucia first. She was championing the AI adoption at 91 from the early days of when we talk about AI, generative AI, et cetera. So, Lucia, what are some of the biggest obstacles that you faced in that journey, and what are some of the experiences that you can share with the audience?
Very good, thank you, Sajesh. And so I will start with a little bit of introduction. Hello, by the way. Nice being here with you all, and thank you for the invitation. You mentioned 91 and me being pushing from early days. I guess it's, every company has the advantages and disadvantages. 91, because of the size, it's, we don't have the biggest investment, but we have more agility, let's say. But also there is a very entrepreneurial mindset in 91. We are very lucky to still be led by the people who founded the company originally. So that is already in the fabric of the company, which makes it easier. So you mentioned about obstacles first. And the very first two I would go straight to, and there are many. But the first two that come to mind actually are probably the same obstacles that we always have had in big technology projects. The first one, I would say data, readiness of data, quality, especially for us incumbent companies that have been going around for ages or have not come from a technology sort of direction. We've got data all over the place. There is a lot of silos, and data sort of have been growing organically. So coming together into how you build your pipelines and put the governance in place and think ultimately incrementally on how you are able to cover that. So that definitely is a major one. And the second one, I would say it's about clear outcomes. What are you measuring, and how is this really going to get anybody excited? And again, I think that's been always an issue in technology. It's very easy to give tasks to technology or come up with a project where you get really busy and you're delivering something, but how is that something really going to be making an impact? There is a lot of people thinking about productivity, but you have to go more commercial than that and think not just about speed, but also about insights or depth, or how is this really adding more value? I was chatting with a couple of people outside a moment ago, and if all we are focusing is on productivity, there is no real gain for the firm. What happens with that extra hour? What do you really do? And it has to be, how do you get more value, and how do you get deeper and more insight? There are many others in financial services: regulations, risks, alignment between all the groups and all the stakeholders, education. So we can talk about all those things, but I will leave it there so my other panelists can say something as well.
No, that is, extremely great point, right? It's not about, everybody jump into the productivity bandwagon first on AI, but there is much more to do when you look at from an outside-in perspective. Now, Smitha, you work with a lot of customers, and you are able to see that from an outside-in perspective, what would be more beneficial for them, cross-industry leverage and everything. So what are some of the, again, I think you mentioned some of the foundational elements. What are you seeing in the marketplace in terms of when it goes to production at the scale? What are you seeing? What are some of those ingredients along with what Lucia was saying?
Yeah, I covered this quite a bit in the morning, but I will talk about things that are not data, which is still important, But purpose-built platforms are quite useful, and elements of the platform or technology could be composable. What I mean by that is you don't need a monolithic platform. Different use cases may need different technologies or different features of a technology. So if we remember when I talked about data foundations and those are the core elements, think about what are those elements that are important for your specific use cases and how your platform can provide those. Of course, there is a governance layer which is non-negotiable, but also from a industry and data perspective, what is your strategy? Is it on the offense or defense? So if you're in a highly regulated organization, there are little risks that you would like to take. Whereas, if you're, it's not a risky use case, or a retail where there is a bit more leeway with the data that you could use, the different approaches. And the second aspect, I was also talking about this during the break. It's about establishing a cross-functional, agile, federated organizations. So what I call this is a modern data community. So rather than have an IT organization responsible for everything in terms of data quality, insights, and managing a platform, you push the responsibility within the organization to the data producers and data consumers. That gives you a lot more agility. So that goes back to proof of concepts. You do a proof of concept with little value, show the value to your customer, get the feedback, put more data in. That's a flywheel effect. And that will enable you to scale. So it's not just technology, people, processes, as well as how you build those processes around that.
Now that's a great segue into what I'm going to ask Paul. See, when you look at, Lucia mentioned about the insights and how it can be powerful. Smitha talked about the federated kind of an organization, how can you experiment, bring new point of views out. But that's where low code, and OutSystem, et cetera, comes into play. Can you elaborate a little bit, Paul, on how your consumers are able to leverage low code and scale AI quite efficiently on top of the foundations?
Yep. Thanks, Sajesh. So I think Chris mentioned this already a little bit in his presentation when he was talking about OutSystems, but low-code solutions, and in particular OutSystems, have always had AI incorporated into the platform ever since I can remember. We've had an AI team in place since 2017, and that's obviously expanded significantly over the last few years. So there's always been accelerators, tooltips, hence, all AI-based, in order to help developers deliver applications a lot faster to the business. However, with the advent of GenAI, this has now made the need so much more in terms of incorporating AI into your application stack. Vashku showed a little bit about Mentor, Mentor and AI Agent Builder. He showed Mentor how we can leverage a natural language through just a specifications document, upload it, build an application within a couple of minutes. And we've also got another tool called AI Agent Builder, which allows you to build agents into your existing portfolio set. So if you wanted to build an AI agent into an existing application, you can quickly do that using sort of the low-code platform. We've been speaking a lot about POCs and proof points. You can quickly conceptualize that within a low-code platform like OutSystems and use those building blocks to deliver that right through the software delivery cycle and pull that through to production. So what we have seen is also you need that human in the loop. I know we've spoken a lot about it today, but when it comes to AI and specifically Gen AI, you always need to make sure that you train that AI model, you verify and you test it. So that is key in order to have a successful implementation going through to production.
Thank you, Paul. I think that's a very important element in terms of people think that suddenly it's going all the way to AI and the machines alone, but there is a very important factor about human in the loop and how that feedback loop really can scale that operations. Now, Lucia, one of the points that you mentioned at the start, I don't want to leave some of the additional thoughts as well, was around regulations and risk, right? So the fundamental questions comes in is, on one hand, you want to move at speed of light. On the other hand, everybody will stand in front of you saying, no, that is not the way to go. So how are you balancing, I mean, especially if coming from a financial services, and I think it's equally applicable to other industries too, but I think how are you balancing that element from an organization perspective?
Thank you for that question. I was not expecting it. So obviously regulations have been such an important way to obviously control and make sure that the business that we run are safe and a way of protecting our clients, but certainly not a friend for innovation and for speed, as you rightly say, Sajesh. So I guess a few thoughts with that. First, innovation with guardrails. So obviously you've got to make sure that you've got all your paperwork in place and your policies, etc. But that really doesn't talk about speed, really. So how do you get people educated in a way that they are able to embrace these technologies, but they feel safe and they feel that they've got the right guardrails in place. So beyond the policies, what we've been doing is making sure that there is a lot of education. And there is a few phrases, do's and don'ts, that we keep repeating because we want people to remember ultimately what's the essence of what we need to do to be safe. Human in the loop being one of the phrases that we talk about. We talk about not in front of our clients. So there is so many ways of us as a financial service, and particularly as an asset management, where we can get deeper insights or better outcomes for, and we talk a lot about augmentation and acceleration. That is not putting the bot in front of the client, which feels a big risk in terms of what advice we're giving to clients. So that way you reduce the risk while you still are delivering good outcomes for the firm. So I would say that's definitely an important one. The second one is you've got to bring all the various parties from the beginning, from design into the conversation. So there will be the people who are not really thinking about the risks, who want to get the commercial outcomes. Great, bring them on, but also bring your compliance team and your legal team, InfoSec, into the conversation. I'm surprisingly fortunate that the person that leads innovation in my team is also our CISO. So bringing those two hats together into one, and you know, Samantha in my team, is actually quite interesting, and it's been coincidental because she put her hand up at the right time, and she's leading the innovation piece. But having both the people who are thinking innovative and wanted to be running ahead with the people who are the ones that are kicking and screaming, and at the other end, in the room from the beginning, you're thinking, I guess you get to a better solution from design. So those two. The third one I would say is we in investment management, we've got an industry association as well, IA, and that's a really good partnership and membership that we have in order to really fully make sure that we're not doing something silly that everybody else have not thought of. So being part of that industry conversation is also important for us to be safe.
No, that's the great point. Again, I totally agree. I think we are also seeing that the more you create a more of an inclusive aspect at the start itself, bringing in other departments, not just thinking about it from a technological lens, that really helps so that collective thought process and the guardrails can be put ahead of the time. Now, from for you, Smitha, as well, maybe you start, Smitha, and then Paul. From a technology aspect, how are these things, again, you are seeing it from multi-industry perspective. How are you seeing this how are people balancing this, and what are some of the things that inherently you can put in the technology itself to safeguard some of the risks?
Yeah. So I think one of the important thing to also note about this whole Gen AI is that from an industry use cases perspective, there are organizations who are building their own custom LLMs And then if you look into different governmental bodies, right? In the end, some of the LLMs are trained on Western data, but there's also culturally aware LLMs that are being built to specifically cater to the users in certain countries. And for all of that, building that is a heavy investment that is required from an infrastructure perspective. So Gen AI is not just a chatbot, right? So there's a need for compute, storage, as well as data, of course, and then MLOps and security, privacy. So these are all the elements that are required. And from there, it is also that a responsible AI guardrails that you're talking about, because you put an AI system out in the market and that is giving inconsistent responses, trust is lost. There's no way you can win that back. But how do you secure that? That is through the selection of technology, through where you have the tools, guardrails to reduce the toxicity, hallucinations, but also put in measures where, again, we did talk quite a bit about this in the morning around observability, transparency, ethics. What are these use cases being used for? And those are all important. So having that technology and a human element, but also a long-term planning in terms of what is the return I want, and do I invest in that stack?
No, that is really great. I mean, Paul, if you would like to add anything.
Yeah. So the way we see this is we see this as an ongoing and a multi-dimensional challenge. So as technology evolves, as it is evolving at the pace it is, we see companies will have to also evolve with their strategies to ensure that their applications and their Gen AI models and so on stay safe, compliant, and secure. In our experience, and ever since we've now incorporated the Gen AI tools within our portfolio, we've seen that companies are still pretty tentative to fully embrace AI into their application portfolio. And there's a couple of reasons for that, and I think the two main reasons is governance and security. So they come to us with these concerns, and I think there's two areas where a low-code platform and low-code technologies can help. And the first one is that platforms like ours give customers the ability, and they give them a playground. So the ability to try, trust, create POCs very quickly, iterate, change, make changes on the fly, and give them that sort of peace of mind and also time to come up with the governance and sort of security that they need. The other one is that platforms like OutSystems, we do come with a certain amount of governance and security in place already. So, all the certifications that you may need to comply to, those are already in place with the platform like OutSystems. So that does further accelerate the governance and security concerns that organizations may still have.
Thank you, Paul. So I will open up the floor for any questions from the audience. I have one more question to all of you, but before I do mine, I just want to make sure that we give the opportunity to others also to ask questions. Yeah, I think can we give a microphone here? If you can just state your name and then.
My name is Amanda Ogunbayo. I'm an IT consultant. I work in financial services, so I'm a contractor. I hear a lot about responsible AI and it being ethical. My question is, I know that in different countries there might be standards. What happens when you have to build a system that is global? So how do you actually put together every single thing that is required for that system? So, because I'm thinking that in terms of privacy, what's required in China is different from what is required in America, and the same thing for the UK. So how are you going to be able to put a system that actually takes into consideration all those policies?
I can start. First of all, not easy. That's the reality. For us, I guess sometimes we go to the minimum common denominator, but that's not great from a commercial perspective. One key way of resolving for this, it's obviously having different levels of abstraction. So where do you implement the rules? A lot of the rules are to do with data and the usage of data. So can you put that into your data layer so you are not compromising the outcomes for all the different regions? Obviously, it really depends on the particular rules, and we got to be following up on those things that are changing so rapidly. But I would say configuration, layers of abstractions, and putting the rules in the right place.
Just to add a legal and asked about ethical component. From our perspective, any use cases that we undertake, firstly, they go through a responsible AI review, understand what the risk is, what the usage is. If it is a high-risk use case, we do consult our legal team, advise, and make sure that we comply with the regional laws, regulations, strictly to those. And we also advise our customers based on that, following those guidelines. So I don't think there's ever been a solution that is global, that has been rolled out across without taking into considerations a country, region-specific laws, privacy. And it also starts with data, of course, right? The data should not leave boundaries. Data sovereignty is so important. So that is same thing applies to AI as well.
Thank you. Any other question? Thank you for your question.
Hi, I'm Sadaf Sultan. My question is, are financial services companies, developing their own AI agents and LLM, given that it's the most regulated industry?
So obviously, I cannot talk for the entire industry. But I do know that other companies are working and investing in some of those solutions. In our case, we are an active asset manager. We are much more institutional based. So we are not as much thinking about how we're interacting with our clients, but much more thinking about internally how we are getting deeper with our insights and our, I guess, outcomes in terms of alpha generation, really. That's where it really makes a big difference for us. But we are exploring all of the above, really. And I'm very aware that other companies, particularly banks, I would say, to your question, also investing heavily on how they are able to respond to client demands in that way.
I hope that answered the question. I think, yeah, the space is evolving very, very rapidly. So there are, common LLMs that are leveraged by everybody, but also people are creating their own agents that is more, aligned to their business and aligned to what they are looking for from an insight standpoint as well. So now there is definitely an opportunity again to ask more questions after this. So let me, go to the kind of I would say concluding question, but I think it's important question as well as also your parting thoughts also, Lucia, Smitha, and Paul. If you look at it, at the end of the day, when you take it to production, take it to steady state, everybody's in that journey. The steady state may be a couple of years down the line, etc. How do you measure the success? What should you measure, right? ROI, yes, it's important, but for an emerging technology like AI or the space, ROI is not the right measure of success, right? So how do you see it in your organization? What do you tell your teams to look at from a measure of success? And I would like to get that from Smitha.
I guess the first thing that comes to mind is adoption. Because, as you said, these technologies are advancing and moving very fast, and we already have some 3 particular use cases where we've seen gains that are quite measurable in terms of productivity and some of the depth. But But we know that's going to change so rapidly. And the reason for us to go there quickly, and you mentioned how we've been sort of, I guess, pushing for it from the beginning, is not so much for the early gains, but for realizing that there's big gains to be had. And if you're not walking the path, you're not going to be ready because you're not going to have all the knowledge, experience. So for me, this is more about what are we learning. So the more adoption, the more you learn, the more effective you're going to be at making the most of it when these technologies, well, keep moving so fast. So yeah, for me, adoption is key.
Thank you, Lucia. Before we go to Smitha, if there's one thought that you want to leave the team or the audience with, what would be that thought in terms of if we have to take it to production, what we should think about?
Something that I also tell a lot in my company, embrace the messiness of innovation. So this, I guess, old-fashioned way of thinking that everything has to be perfect and 100% ready. I guess agility comes from starting small and starting incremental and putting it into production soonest so you can see how it really acts and you don't need to give it to the entire company. You can give it to a small group. But for me, education, awareness, and that, I guess, getting everybody to buy that this is going to be messy and we're going to make mistakes, but we got to do it in a way that we can learn and be safe at the same time. So yeah, that's definitely my advice.
Definitely going to steal that tagline. I think that's killer. But Smitha, again, from measure of success and your parting thoughts on what do you recommend?
So of course, a business value is important. That is, in the end, that is what, at the board level, they ask, what is the ROI? You can't escape. But at the same time, you don't have to jump in on the hype, but also don't stay behind the curve. And how do you balance that? That is only you can define based on what your priorities are. And my parting thought is focus on what really matters and have strong foundations. That will enable you to ignore the hype, but anything that is changing constantly, you're ready. And that is very important.
Thank you. Paul?
Yeah, I think the most obvious to me is tracking the business impact once these AI agents or AI solutions have been implemented. So I want to take one example. At OutSystems, we drink our own champagne. So once we had released the AI agent builder, which builds AI agents using any LLM, we decided to implement that within our support team. And the results were significant. So I'm just going to read what the results were. So within our support team, after we implemented it about a year ago now, after the first month of going live, there was a 27.7 deflection in support tickets and a 23.8 deflection in support incidents for our customers. I mean, the one that I want to focus on is the 23.8% deflection in support incidents, which is massive. That was a 544%, that was up 544% from the previous month when we had no AI agents. And it equated, the business calculated that equated to £25,000 monthly cost avoidance. So straight away there was an impact from the get-go. I mean, the other use case that I like using is because I'm in pre-sales, I manage a pre-sales team within the UK and Ireland. Nearly every opportunity we get RFP requests to fill in, and some of these RFPs questions can be up to 1,000 questions, which can take 2 to 3 weeks at a time to complete. So one of the pre-sales engineers in the UK decided to diligently go and do his own, create his own app, build the app within OutSystems, and then incorporate AI agents in it to be able to, he first trained it to look at previous RFPs, internal documentation, as well as public documentation. And the result of that is we've found that there's been significant impact in terms of the amount of time we take to answer these RFPs. We've saved probably like 50% or even up to 75% on each one of the RFPs we have to answer. So yeah, it's quite a big impact once you measure it.
No, thank you again. Once again, thank you, Lucia, Smitha, and Paul. This was really insightful. So if I summarize very quickly, right, what we were discussing, first of all, to look at problems not just from a productivity angle, but the broader business impact and the business insights. That will be really, really powerful to look at how this, when you scale these AI solutions. Second, we talked about having a purpose-built platform. How do we bring in more kind of that federated mindset into the teams so that it's not only a few, the few good men thinking, as they say it. How do you do that more effectively? And more importantly, bringing human in the loop. We talked about that in terms of how do we make that AI and the feedback loop being more powerful. From a scalability standpoint, we talked about guardrail bringing broader organization into that journey sooner. It may not be making their, getting them into project teams, but I think it's important to bring them, get their inputs as well, so that you're looking at more holistically as an organization. We talked about also, how do we bring in, I would summarize some of the things that you mentioned, Smitha, Paul, and all, is creating a blueprint, right? That is, having that architecture, that is much more having the ability to look at scale, explainability, security, and all those things built into that foundational elements. And then, more importantly, how do we look at the right metrics, which we talked about adoption being a very important part. Is it really been used in practically on a day-to-day basis? We talked about, looking at that bigger gain and understanding that bigger gain as we scale is an important part. And finally, to summarize, as Lucia said, embrace the messiness of this journey, but in a good way for organizations that really want to scale it to the next level. So once again, extremely thankful, Lucia, Smitha, and Paul, for a very thoughtful session, and thank you for sharing your thoughts.